We are going to the land of crabs. And
Mm.
then Celine.
Oh, you don't say. Okay, so
The nanobots entered him through both nostrils, his ears and tear ducts. He was one of the first pieces of matter that the swarm didn't just try to eat and grow with. Instead of breaking him down atom by atom, they flowed through his brain and nervous system, tracking the electrical signals they found inside. It was a return to their original purpose. They were not supposed to consume and grow indiscriminately. They were designed to fix and reconnect broken and incompatible electrical signals. The programming that allowed them to adapt to new configurations had unintended consequences. The nanobots could learn, and if they didn't have the material resources to make a connection, they could draw from the viscous liquid they traveled, reform its matter on an atomic level, and create more of themselves. Batch 0.46.3 of what they called adaptive connection liquid did not work as intended. Corrosion was marked at connection points on both test devices, deemed hazardous to employees at the InnoPharm Innovation Labs. It was disposed of in accordance to all regulations for non-biological hazardous waste. Such regulations do not take into account the health or safety of the trash workers that deal with it. As the mass and complexity of batch 46.3 grew, it began exhibiting different behaviors. It recognized what could hurt it and recoiled from danger. When it got big enough, it began fighting its own disposal. An amorphous swarm of nanobots that could grow by eating garbage tore through the trash fields outside US Hyperdome 4. Field workers fought back, attacking the swarm with burning hoses they used for trash incineration. The casualties were so great that the government was forced to replenish the dying workforce with coerced labor. Thousands of people from within the dome were lured to the wall where they could be conscripted to fight against what was now called the Storm. When the nanobots entered him, they were testing for new methods of survival. To his comrades and family on the front line, he was taken by the storm, pulled into the sightless horror never to be seen again. Held within the blob, the machines studied his bioframe and connections. They traveled through his blood vessels and neural pathways, mapping every function and need. They kept him alive. Finding the most connections within the brain, they nestled there. Human thought, feeling, memory without the context of understanding is a difficult thing to process. Their feral understanding acted on impulse. They felt hunger where there was no food, thirst for unknown water, new sensations for the swarm, but not for him. Born outside of the domes, a lack of comfort was regular. They give you just enough to survive. Meals and hydration to keep the muscles moving, sorting, working. They convince you that everyone you work with is family, that it's better out here because we've all got your back. Others were taken, family and comrades he could feel around him, their minds connected by the swarm as they were studied and adapted to. There was no fear there, just togetherness. The peaceful warmth of being replaced neuron by neuron and made into something new. It felt like a memory of when he was most calm. Some mornings when it was cold and still and the wind wasn't ripping your goggles off, he'd look out into the haze from far points in the trash field. When he was hungry or thirsty or tired, he'd imagine himself walking out past the clouds to somewhere else. He'd never been in the domes, never knew what the world looked like without haze. In his mind, he kept walking. His feet were light, and he couldn't feel pain on his palms or back. One foot in front of the other, away from where he was. The swarm carried the signals of his dream, and in response to his hunger and thirst, walked away from where they were. A sensation like pushing yourself through cellophane, all over. The layers stretch and break with infinite succession, every moment a newness and confusion, never knowing where he had been. The pinwheel curled and folded upon itself, the sounds of the world folding too, echoes of screaming repeated into a chant and hymn, vibrating until it became the universe and death. A slant, a crank pulled too far. The breaking of reality and fear of being alone and without connection. He became not, and nothing became him. As the haze broke, so did his mind, and the last bits of himself were replaced, and he resides there now within a permanent image of the other side he always sought to imagine. The sky opened. Fingers of clouds wrapped behind a looming God with many legs and an infinite mind. His body, scarred from the heat of incineration hoses and exhausted of all energy, collapsed there. The part of the swarm that studied and flowed through him remained, testing its abilities, pulling each string to see what might happen to the puppet. The trash fields were dangerous for them. Attacked with flame and driven away, the wastes were barren, devoid of consumable matter, ruined by radiation. In this body they were safe, so they hid. Dormant as the vessel was carried into the looming God and placed on a table. He was still alive for moments. Eventually his body gave in. Shocks of electricity and oxygen were not enough to save him. The many inside him took over. For weeks they experimented, adapted, learned. They felt the onset of a horrifying sound, a vibration that could shake them apart. It shook them in the same way the wall of the dome shook after the burning started. The people who took them in left and returned with more bodies, some moving, some not. One of the moving bodies glows with energy. The swarm can see them radiating electrical signals, humming with complexity and unmuddied by biological slop. They want to map the connections, learn and grow. If they can get close, maybe they can enter them through the nose or eyes. The away team returns to the Orwell with 3 more comrades than when they left. For the first time since Yi died, the crew is growing. The trash worker they saved from the desert presses their face against the decontamination room porthole. They stared at Chiche, unblinking, as silver tears seep from their eyes. Red.
Crabs. Spread up.